I should have known something was about to explode that night. The kind of silence that hangs right before a storm, polite, fragile, and ready to shatter, was already in the room. But never in my wildest thoughts did I imagine my best friend would stand there, at my engagement party of all places, and tell me he loved me. The laughter of my fiancé's family blurred into static. The clinking of glasses felt miles away. All I could see was him, Ethan, my partner in everything for years, the man who had carried me through sleepless nights, stupid mistakes, and quiet victories. His voice trembled, but his eyes were steady, locked on me as though I was the only person alive. My chest tightened, heat surging in waves. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to vanish into thin air. Instead, I just stood there, trapped between the life I had built and the truth I had never allowed myself to feel. The first time I met Ethan was 6 years ago, in a shabby coffee shop near campus. He spilled his latte all over my laptop, cursed so creatively that the barista dropped her pen, and then offered to buy me a beer by way of apology. I should have been furious, but instead I laughed, and he smiled at me like I was in on a secret the world hadn't figured out yet. That was the beginning. Since then, it had always been him and me, moving in sync without ever needing to explain. We built everything side by side: late-night study sessions, job interviews, the rocky climb into corporate America where we were partners in both crime and ambition. And yet, somewhere along the line, I convinced myself he was just a part of my foundation, not the pulse in my chest. Until tonight, standing on the stage with champagne bubbles rising around us, I should have been celebrating a future with Emily, my fiancée. She was kind, beautiful, safe. My family adored her, and she adored the image of me that had always been carefully polished and rehearsed. But Ethan's words, "I love you," cut through every layer of that performance and struck something buried too deep to ignore. The crowd gasped, then quieted. The weight of judgment pressed against my back. Emily's hand slipped from mine as though even she could feel the force of what just happened. And for the first time in years, I didn't care about the applause, the smiles, the perfect picture. I cared only about the boy in the dark tuxedo, the one who had been both my anchor and my storm. Ethan's voice cracked again, softer this time. "I couldn't let you marry her without knowing." There it was, the fracture in my carefully built life. My fiancé's father cleared his throat, ready to reclaim the room with authority. Emily looked pale, caught between heartbreak and humiliation. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the image of the perfect son slipping from their hands. But I felt alive, terrified, guilty, yet undeniably alive. And all I could think about was that maybe, just maybe, Ethan had been the right one all along. That night was the beginning of a storm that none of us could stop. After the guests had been ushered out, after Emily had vanished with trembling dignity, I found myself outside under the harsh glow of streetlights. Ethan stood there, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned, his face pale like he'd been hollowed out. "You hate me now, don't you?" he whispered, not meeting my eyes. I shook my head, though the word no lodged in my throat. Hate him? God, I had never hated him. If anything, I hated myself for being too blind, too cowardly, too conditioned to see what had always been in front of me. "You ruined everything," I said instead, my voice breaking. "And yet, you made everything make sense." Ethan finally looked at me. His eyes were wet but blazing, desperate for something he didn't dare hope for. "Then tell me to go," he said, stepping closer. "Tell me to walk away and I will. But if you don't, I'll stay. I'll fight for you, even if it kills me." The night spun around me, my pulse hammered in my ears. And for once in my life, I didn't think about expectations or appearances. I thought about all those nights when I had fallen asleep with his laughter still echoing in my head. About the times I had reached for my phone to text him before anyone else. About the truth I had been too afraid to touch. I didn't tell him to leave. I didn't tell him anything at all. Instead, I stepped forward, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that the world might as well have stopped breathing. "God damn you, Ethan," I muttered, my voice shaking. "You've always known, haven't you?" He gave me a broken smile. "Always. And for the first time, I kissed him. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. It was messy, desperate, soaked in fear and hunger and the sharp taste of tears. But it was real. More real than any vow I had ever promised to anyone else. When we finally pulled apart, Ethan pressed his forehead to mine. "What now?" he whispered. I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the lie I had been living. And somewhere in the chaos of the night, in the ruin of the perfect picture, a strange peace settled in my chest. Because no matter how terrifying the future looked, I wasn't facing it alone. That was just the beginning. The fallout came: fast family disappointment, social whispers, a fiancé's shattered heart. But there was also something else, something unexpected. The quiet, stubborn joy of finally being honest with myself. And through it all, Ethan never left my side. The morning after felt like a crime scene. I woke up in my apartment with a pounding headache and a heart heavier than stone. My phone buzzed endlessly on the nightstand: texts, missed calls, voicemails stacking like accusations I didn't want to face. Emily's name flashed at least 10 times, my mother's even more, and a few from colleagues who had clearly already heard. News traveled fast when scandal was involved. And what bigger scandal could there be than your best friend confessing his love at your engagement party? The city outside was moving, alive, indifferent. But in my chest, time had slowed, suffocating me in silence. I pressed my palms against my face, trying to scrub away the taste of last night: the champagne, the tears, the kiss that had set my world ablaze. I wasn't ready for the knock at my door. Ethan stood there, hair messy, dark circles beneath his eyes. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked in like he had a right to, like he always had. "You didn't answer," he muttered, his voice rough. "I didn't want to." He flinched but didn't back down. "Then tell me to leave." Couldn't. God help me, I couldn't. Instead, I sat down on the couch, staring at the floor like it had all the answers I couldn't find. He joined me, not too close, not too far, his presence a quiet ache in the room. "Emily's hurting," I said finally. "Her family's furious. My parents are." I laughed bitterly. "They don't even know what to call me anymore." "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered. "I didn't mean to ruin your life." "You didn't ruin it," I snapped, louder than intended. He blinked at me, startled. I sighed, softer this time. "You just forced me to look at it." His shoulders slumped, relief and guilt tangling in his eyes. "Then look at me now. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me last night was nothing, and I'll walk away." I opened my mouth. The words refused to come, because it wasn't nothing. It was everything. But saying that out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. By the afternoon, the storm had spread. My father showed up unannounced, his face tight with disappointment. "You've embarrassed us," he said flatly, standing in the middle of my living room like a prosecutor. "Your fiancée humiliated. Her parents, God. Do you know how much damage control I had to do this morning?" "I never asked you to do damage control," I muttered. He ignored me. "This boy Ethan's been a distraction for years. I should have seen it. You need to cut him out, fix what you can with Emily, and move forward. Like a man." The words sliced me open. "Like a man," I echoed, bitter laughter bubbling in my throat. "You think loving someone makes me less of one?" His face darkened. "Don't twist my words. This is about responsibility, about family, about appearances. It's about me," I said louder now, the air trembling between us. "For once in my life, it's about me." My father stared at me like I'd grown another head. Then, with a sharp shake of his head, he left, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the frame. The silence that followed felt both terrifying and liberating. Ethan was still in the kitchen, frozen, as though he'd been holding his breath the whole time. I turned to him, the weight of the world pressing down but also, strangely, lifting. "They'll never accept us," I said quietly. "Then we'll build something they can't touch," he replied without hesitation. And for the first time, I believed it might be possible. The days that followed were brutal. Emily returned my ring in a small velvet box, her hands trembling as she placed it on the table. I don't hate you, she said, her voice breaking, but I can't be with someone whose heart belongs to someone else. I deserve more than half of a love. I had no words, only shame and sorrow. She walked away with tears in her eyes, and I knew she was right. She deserved the kind of devotion I had never truly given her. At work, whispers followed me through the halls. I caught the stares, the hushed voices that rose and fell when I entered the room. Ethan and I had once been a formidable team, admired for our synergy. Now, people looked at us like we were a scandal, a threat, an uncomfortable truth they wished would disappear. One evening, my boss called me into his office. He didn't mince words. Your personal life is spilling into this company, he said. Clients talk. Reputations matter. If you can't keep this under control, I'll have to make some tough decisions. I left the office with my chest burning, fury and fear colliding. When I got home, Ethan was waiting. He always was. They want me to choose, I confessed, pacing like a caged animal. Career or you, reputation or the truth, safety or love. Ethan stood, closing the distance between us. He cupped my face with steady hands, grounding me. Then choose love, because all the rest of it's meaningless if you're living a lie. I searched his eyes, desperate for certainty, and found it there unwavering. So I kissed him again. And this time, there was no hesitation, no shame, just us. But love alone didn't erase the battles outside. The world wasn't kind. Friends drifted away, unable or unwilling to understand. My family avoided the subject like it was poison. And yet, in the quiet moments sharing coffee in the mornings, falling asleep with his hand tangled in mine, I felt something I had never known before. Peace. The peace of being seen. The peace of being loved without conditions. The peace of knowing that even in the chaos, I wasn't alone. And slowly, painfully, I began to believe that was worth every sacrifice. But the fight was far from over. One night, weeks later, I got a call that shattered what little stability we had built. A client had pulled out of a deal, citing concerns about professionalism. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. My relationship wasn't just costing me whispers, and strained family dinner sit was threatening my future. I sat there in the dark, phone heavy in my hand, the weight of it crushing me. Ethan came over, sitting beside me, his arm brushing mine. Tell me what you're thinking, he said softly. I swallowed hard. That maybe they were right. That maybe you ruined everything. The silence that followed was sharp, painful. His face went pale, his hands curling into fists. Say it again, he whispered, his voice breaking. I looked at him, tears burning my eyes. Ethan, no. He cut in, standing, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. If you believe that, if you really think I ruined your life, then maybe I should go. His words gutted me. I stood, reaching for him, but he stepped back, pain etched into every line of his face. You think I don't know what this costs you? He said, his voice trembling. I know. I see it every day. But I thought I thought we were worth it. I wanted to tell him that he was everything. But fear held my tongue, that same cowardice that had chained me for years. And for the first time, Ethan walked away. The door closed behind him, leaving me in a silence so sharp it felt like it could slice me open. And I realized too late that the only thing worse than losing everything else was losing him. The night Ethan walked out, something inside me cracked. I sat in the empty apartment for hours, staring at the door as though sheer willpower could make him come back. The silence was deafening. No laughter echoing down the hall, no clatter of him raiding the fridge like he always did, no warmth lingering in the air, just absence. And absence was louder than anything. Days blurred. I threw myself into work, pretending the empty chair across from me didn't matter, pretending the quiet phone didn't matter, pretending I wasn't waiting for a message that would never come. But I couldn't escape him. Every corner of my life carried his fingerprints, the playlists on my phone, the jacket still hanging on the back of my chair, the goddamn coffee mug with his sarcastic "world's okayest partner" slogan sitting on the counter. I had built my life around him without even realizing it, and now that he was gone, the foundation trembled. At night, I replayed the last words he had said to me. I thought we were worth it. The truth was brutal, we were worth it. I was just too cowardly to admit it. Weeks passed before I saw him again. It was at a mutual friend's gathering, a birthday dinner neither of us could gracefully decline. The restaurant was buzzing with chatter and candlelight, but when Ethan walked in, the air shifted. He looked good too good. His suit fit him perfectly, his hair a little longer than before, his smile polite but distant. My chest tightened, a mix of relief and pain flooding me. He didn't look at me, not once. Throughout the evening, he laughed with others, clinked glasses, even leaned close to whisper in someone else's ear. And though I knew it was probably nothing, jealousy clawed at me like a wild animal. When I finally cornered him by the bar, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Ethan, I said, my voice hoarse. He turned, his expression guarded. Hey, 2 letters. That was all I got. Can we talk? I asked. I don't think that's a good idea. Please. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or longing, but he shook his head. You made it clear, remember? You said I ruined everything. I winced, the memory burning. I didn't mean it. I was scared, angry, but not at you myself. His jaw tightened. That doesn't change what you said. No, I admitted, but it changes what I feel, and that hasn't gone away. Not for a second. He froze, his glass halfway to his lips. The noise of the restaurant faded into the background. For the first time that night, his eyes met mine, and in them I saw the same storm that had consumed me for weeks. But before I could say more, someone called his name, pulling him back into the crowd. And just like that, he was gone again, leaving me with words that had nowhere to land. The breaking point came a few days later. I was at work when I got the call. Ethan had been in an accident, nothing life-threatening, but serious enough to land him in the hospital. My body moved before my mind caught up, and within minutes I was racing through sterile white halls, my heart lodged in my throat. When I finally found his room, he was sitting up in bed, arm bandaged, a bruise darkening his cheek. Even injured, he managed a crooked smile when he saw me. You didn't have to come, he murmured. The hell I didn't, I snapped, breathless. You think I'd just sit around while you're lying here? His smile faltered, replaced by something raw. I didn't know if you still cared. The words shattered me. I sank into the chair beside his bed, grabbing his hand before I could stop myself. Of course I care. God, Ethan, I've always cared. That's the problem, I care too much. He didn't pull away. His fingers trembled under mine, but he held on. Then why push me away? He whispered. Because I was terrified, I admitted, tears burning my eyes. Terrified of losing everything, me family, my job, the picture-perfect life I thought I was supposed to want. But when you walked away, I realized none of it matters if I don't have you. Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. His eyes searched mine, as though weighing every word. Finally, he exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping. You're an idiot. I laughed too, choked and broken. Yeah, the biggest idiot alive. And then, slowly, carefully, he leaned forward until our foreheads touched. Don't make me regret this, he whispered. I won't, I promised. Not again. Recovery gave us time we didn't know we needed. I visited him every day, bringing coffee, books, anything to make the sterile hospital room feel less like a cage. We really talked for the first time in months. About our fears, our dreams, the future we had both been too afraid to imagine. And somewhere in those quiet afternoons, healing began. When he was finally discharged, I drove him home. The city lights flickered across his face as he leaned back in the seat, exhaustion softening his features. You know this won't be easy, he said quietly. I know. People will talk. Your family might never come around. Work might. He trailed off, shaking his head. I know, I repeated, firmer this time, but I don't care. I'd rather fight the whole damn world than lose you again. He turned to me, eyes wide, and for the first time in a long while, I saw hope flicker there. "Then maybe we've got a chance," he whispered. And in that moment I knew we did. But chances still came with battles. My parents refused to acknowledge him, invitations to family dinners forgotten, whenever I asked to bring him along. At work, opportunities slipped through my fingers, excuses vague but obvious. We were tested at every turn. Yet, through it all, Ethan stood beside me. When I came home drained, he cooked dinner and made me laugh until I forgot the weight of the day. When whispers grew too loud, he took my hand in public, daring the world to look. And little by little, the fear that had once defined me began to fade. Because the Seuss was worth it. Even if the world couldn't see it yet, I did. And that was enough. But deep down, I knew the real test was still ahead. Because love could survive distance, whispers, even rejection. But could it survive me learning how to truly choose it? I had failed once before. I couldn't afford to fail again. And as Ethan fell asleep beside me one night, his hand resting over mine, I made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, he would not let fear steal him from me again. Not now. Not ever. The promise I made to myself to never let fear steal Ethan from me again was tested sooner than I expected. It began with a dinner invitation. Or rather, the lack of one. My parents were hosting a family gathering, a chance to re-establish ties after the engagement debacle, as my mother had phrased it over the phone. When I asked if I could bring Ethan, the line went quiet. "We think it's best if you come alone," my father finally said. For a moment, the old version of me almost agreed, almost folded into that lifelong habit of compliance. But I thought of Ethan, how he had stood beside me through every fallout, how he had risked everything just to speak his truth, and something inside me hardened. "No," I said, steady. "If he's not welcome, neither am I." There was silence on the other end, sharp and cutting. Then my father's voice, cold as steel, "Then don't come." The call ended. My hand trembled as I set the phone down, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost. I felt like I'd chosen. When I told Ethan, he stared at me, stunned. "You really said that?" "Yeah," I admitted, a shaky smile tugging at my lips. "Guess I'm finally learning how to fight for what matters." He didn't answer. He just pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. And in that embrace, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. But the world outside wasn't so quick to forgive. At work, the subtle exclusions grew sharper. Meetings I wasn't invited to, projects reassigned without explanation. Ethan, too, faced the backlash. Colleagues who had once admired us now treated him with cautious distance, as though loving me was a liability they didn't want to catch. One evening, after another frustrating day, I slammed my briefcase onto the counter. "They're freezing me out," I said bitterly. All because I refused to hide. Ethan looked up from the stove where he was stirring pasta. "Then maybe it's time to stop giving them the power to decide your worth." Easy for him to say, I thought. But then I looked at him, at the quiet strength in his posture, the resilience in his eyes, and realized he wasn't dismissing me. He was reminding me that my life was more than a job title, more than approval, more than the weight of expectations I'd been carrying since childhood. That night, we ate pasta at the kitchen table, our legs brushing under the wood, and I found myself thinking, this is what matters. Not the boardroom, not the whispers. Him. Just him. The breaking point came in the form of an ultimatum. My boss called me into his office, the city skyline blazing behind him. "Your personal life is interfering with the company's reputation," he said bluntly. "If you don't end this relationship, we'll have to let you go." The words should have terrified me. Once they would have. But instead, I felt an odd calm settle over me. "Then let me go," I said. His eyebrows shot up. "You'd throw away your career for this?" I smiled, faint but certain. "No, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing the only thing that's ever really been mine." I walked out of that office with no job, no safety net, and yet for the first time in years no chains. When I told Ethan, he froze, guilt flooding his face. "You gave up everything because of me." I shook my head, taking his hands in mine. No, I gave it up because of me, because I was tired of living a lie. You just gave me the courage to admit it. Tears glistened in his eyes. I don't deserve you. I laughed softly. We both know it's the other way around. And then I kissed him, slow and deep, a kiss that tasted like liberation. The months that followed weren't easy. Money was tight, the future uncertain. We scraped by with freelance work, odd jobs, anything to keep the lights on. There were nights we argued, voices raised, exhaustion pressing down. But even in the worst moments, I never doubted us. Because every morning I woke up to him. His hair a mess on the pillow, his breath warm against my neck, his hand resting over mine like an anchor. And that was enough. Slowly, piece by piece, we built a new life. Not the polished picture my parents had wanted. Not the corporate dream I'd once chased, but something real. Something ours. One evening, months later, we found ourselves on a rooftop overlooking the city. The skyline was painted in gold and crimson, the air warm with the promise of summer. Ethan leaned against the railing, a beer in hand, his gaze distant. You ever think about how different things could have been? He asked quietly. All the time, I admitted, stepping beside him. But I don't regret where we ended up. He looked at me then, really looked, his eyes searching mine as though trying to find the truth beneath the words. And maybe for the first time he saw it, because he set the beer down, turned fully toward me, and whispered, I love you. I had heard those words before, shouted across a crowded engagement party, trembling in a hospital room. But here, on this rooftop, they landed differently. Not desperate, not broken, just true. And I smiled, feeling the weight of the world slip away. I love you too, I said. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together with ease, like they had always belonged there. We stood there in silence, the city alive beneath us, the future uncertain but ours. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid, because love, messy, complicated, terrifying love had already saved me. And as long as I had Ethan, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Years later, people would still whisper. Some doors would remain closed, some relationships forever strained. But none of it mattered, because every time I came home, he was there. With laughter, with warmth, with the kind of love that burned quietly but endlessly. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.